When I started this channel about videography and editing, I never thought that I'd be sitting here talking about skin, yet here we are. Now look, my skin is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's not terrible, but it's not the best. We all have those days where we wake up and we've got some bags under our eyes, maybe we've got some blackheads, a zit, whatever it might be. We're all human and it's bound to happen at some point. But one thing we can all agree on is that when it does happen, it's extremely annoying, especially if we have to be on camera. Now, if you're a photographer or a videographer, you're gonna deal with a lot of clients who don't necessarily have perfect skin, and that's okay. In this tutorial here today, we're not going to be talking about makeup and we're not going to be talking about VFX for removing blemishes in post. But what we will be going over are 3 ways to make skin look overall a little bit smoother and more flattering on camera. Alright, so let's say this sheet of blue Bristol board is our skin. We'll place that right here and bring in this little adapter screw and we'll call that our blemish. You could say that's a pimple or something along those lines. Next, we will bring in our light source. In this case, we have the Aperture M9. I'll go ahead and turn that on and then we'll place it back here. Turn off our room lights, bump up the ISO on the camera, and what we're left with is a very dramatic shadow, as you can see here, caused by our blemish. Now right over here we have a sheet of nylon silk diffusion. This is cut out from a sheet which I bought on Amazon, and if we take this sheet of nylon diffusion and stick it in front of our light source, you can see that that dramatic shadow that was once in front of the blemish is now gone. Let's remove that once again. Harsh shadow, put it back in front of our light, no more harsh shadow. And as we take it further away, you can see the shadow gets bigger, and as we move it closer, the shadow gets smaller. And notice how the entire sheet of diffusion glows and takes on the light source. We have a small little light source here, but once we put the bigger sheet of diffusion in front of it, the whole diffusion sheet becomes a light source. So just to quickly paraphrase all of that, the further your diffusion is away from the light source, the more diffused and soft the light will be. As you bring the diffusion closer to the light source, the diffusion becomes less effective. If you were to use a harsher, more direct light source to light a subject's face or somebody's skin, then you end up accentuating a lot of those imperfections that normally wouldn't show up as much on camera if you were using a more diffused light source. Whether that's pimples or wrinkles, bags under the eyes, or even patchy facial hair, all of these things become more apparent or more noticeable when you use a harsh light because it's casting little micro shadows on the face or on the skin. So that is tip number 1 for getting smoother and more flattering looking skin on camera. Use a softer and more diffused light source. And now moving along to tip number 2. So this right here isn't just any ordinary protective filter for your lens. This is called a black pro mist filter made by a company called Tiffin. So the black pro mist filter actually does a few things, and the most notable things that I've noticed when using it is that it softens up your image just a little bit, not to the point where it's blurry, but it adds a little bit of a less digital, sharp looking image. I find that the finer details in the shot aren't as rigid or gritty. And on top of that, the filter also blooms out your highlights, making them less harsh and more glowy, if that makes sense. Now I'm using the Black Pro Mist 1/4 strength, but you can get more intense filters that create a stylized look, something that's much more dreamy, which you could use on a short film if it calls for a look like that, or a music video. This is really up to your preference. But for everyday use, I would recommend getting a 1/4 or a 1/8. So I'm moving this back and forth in front of the lens and try and pay attention to the effect that it has not only on my face, but also on the lamp in the background. I think it's pretty clear how it softens up the image. This looks really digital and sharp. This just looks a little more soft and even, and I actually think it makes the skin look quite a bit smoother. Now, of course, the results will vary depending what type of filter you get and what strength you choose. Like I said, this is the 1/4, but if you go with something a little stronger, like a 1/2, I'm sure the effect will be even more noticeable. I like to keep it really subtle. I think it just takes the edge off the footage that you don't consciously notice unless you're really looking for it, but it does make a difference, and so far I'm really happy with it. But moving along to our third and final tip, tip, and I think this is something that most people, or at least a lot of people, already know, and that is if you get a new camera, or if you just haven't done this yet, always turn down sharpening and contrast within your picture profile settings. Now, I'm not sure why they do this, but for whatever reason, these camera companies that make DSLR and mirrorless cameras, when you buy the camera out of the box, they usually come factory set with the contrast and sharpening just cranked all the way up. Oftentimes, these picture profile settings that come with the cameras out of the box just don't look good and are especially unflattering on skin tones. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of diffusion out there, and really what it comes down to is what you need it for and how much you're willing to spend. So on the cheaper end of things, we have the sheet of nylon silk diffusion, which we already talked about, and this cost me about 13 bucks on Amazon, but I have seen it for cheaper. This you can tape to things, you can clamp it to things, you can cut it up and use it for DIY projects. Now, you might remember about a month ago I made these DIY cake pan lights and I was really happy with the results. All we have is a basic cake pan with the LED strip going around the inside edge, and then I took a sheet of diffusion and placed it over the cake pan using gaff tape to secure it in place, and this gives us a nice soft indirect diffused light. As I've talked about many times on this channel, I use the Aperture 120D to light all of these videos, or at least most of them. On the Aperture 120D, you have something called a Bowens mount, and what this allows you to do is mount modifiers like the softbox. This is the Aperture Light Dome Mini 2. It's a very small little softbox that basically reflects the light around the inside and then comes out through this diffused material. The Light Dome Mini, for its size, is very effective. It's nice and small, so it's portable, doesn't get in the way on a shoot. But for my liking and my tastes, I prefer the Westcott Rapid Box Octa XXL, which is a huge diffuser which makes really soft light out of the Aperture 120D. So let's say the light you already have doesn't have a Bowens mount and it can't have a softbox attached to it. Well, what you could use is something like this. This is a 5-in-1 reflector from Amazon. It cost me, I think, about 20 bucks. You have the white side of the reflector here, which is really great for bouncing light to fill in some of the shadows on your subject. And then on the other side, we have the gold, and this is great for reflecting warmer light onto your subject if you want it to have a bit more of a warm glow. Now, if we undo the zipper and take a look at the inside, we have the black side of the reflector. This is a negative fill for blocking light from hitting your subject. And then on the other side, we of course have the silver reflector, and this reflects cooler light onto your subject. Now, if we undo the zipper all the way, inside we have a diffuser, and this is great for shining light through it to soften it up, just like I showed you with the soft boxes and with our diffusion material. This is the same thing. It's nice and flexible, so it makes it very portable. You can pack it up and put it into a case, even with the reflector still zipped on. This diffuser is also great for filming in bright sunlight, because oftentimes when you're out there in the sun, your subject will have harsh shadows on their face, or maybe they're squinting from the sun being in their eyes. You place this between your subject and the sun, and suddenly you have a nice, soft, flattering light. Your subject is no longer squinting, and it just looks a lot better. Definitely worth picking up for around 20 bucks. Now, if you've ever watched a behind the scenes of a music video or a commercial or a movie, you may have seen one of these before. This is called a scrim gym. Now, the scrim gym is actually very similar to the last diffuser I showed you from the 5-in-1 reflector, only this is much bigger and much higher quality. The frame is made out of very high quality aluminum, making it very lightweight but also very durable, so you know it's going to last a long time. And the diffusion sheet itself is also very high quality, producing a very soft and even light. The diffusion material is attached to the frame with some Velcro, so it can be taken off and replaced with a different diffusion material or some other reflector. Now, the scrim gym is very high quality and intended for much more professional use, which is why it is so expensive. It's about $300 to $400 for this thing. Generally speaking, that 5-in-1 reflector with the diffuser built in is a much better bang for your buck. It's like only $20 and has everything you need and works just fine. This is definitely overkill, so I would recommend going with the cheaper option in this case. So those are my 3 tips for smoother and more flattering looking skin on camera. I think these are things that people should be doing anyway, and the better looking skin is just a byproduct of this. There are a lot of benefits that come with doing these sorts of things. And of course, if any of you have additional tips for achieving better looking skin in videos, please share those in the comments down below. And on that note, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Follow me on Instagram at daniel.schiffer, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.